Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Now to a bit of a different conversation, Caroline. John Browne spent 42 years at BP, where as CEO he famously led the firm's Beyond Petroleum green reband as the firm acknowledged the reality of climate change. Now he's going right back to the beginning. He's running to become Chancellor of the University of Cambridge, which is a city where he both studied and was raised. He's campaigning on the promise of bringing a focus on sustainability, science and global engagement to the ancient university. But will his years in the city stand him in good stead? I'm pleased to say we're joined by John Browne now. And John, lovely to have you on the programme with us. I want to start with Cambridge because you've occupied many an illustrious role. What is it about the post of Chancellor that attracts you and why is it now?
Well, the great universities of the UK differentiate the UK from many other places in the world. They're right up in the front, and they make a very big difference to society, to economic growth, and to the state and condition of society. And I believe I have a seat at lots of tables. I left BP 18 years ago, and I've been doing a whole variety of things since then, which has given me a seat at the table to allow me to have influence, but not control, over what the universities will do to flourish for the future. And Cambridge is a very important university in the world.
Absolutely. Why is the British government not issuing a more wide open-armed welcome to students and researchers who can't or don't want to remain in the US, as higher education in the US is under enormous pressure to change according to the Trump administration's wishes? Why does the British government, and would you issue that welcome if you were to be the Chancellor at Cambridge, a really open-armed welcome to any students out of the US?
Well, look, I think the Cambridge University is built on great people, and excellence is the big point of Cambridge. And they have always had open arms for absolutely everybody. So this is not just a new thing. It just adds to what Cambridge does. And I know that Cambridge will do that. I think the government should do a lot in this area. I know the Royal Society and the Royal Academy of Engineering are actually now going to add funds to this, and other institutions. I chair the Crick Institute, big biomedical institute, and we're bringing forward the recruitment of some of our group leaders, and we hope that the US will provide a lot of the candidates for that.
Would part of your open-armed welcome be offering the opposite of Trump's anti-woke push, an active embrace of DEI?
Well, I think I think Cambridge should embrace everything. Cambridge stands for freedom of speech and freedom of investigation. And that's very important. I believe that, as the saying goes, Cambridge is a place where they may disagree with what people say. One party may disagree with the other, but they will fight to allow that party to say what they think. And I think that's really This is how ideas are generated, how discoveries are made, and how actually we make discoveries in science and technology and make them applicable to society through the universal nature of Cambridge, which is a place where humanities stand equal to science, technology, and mathematics.
Oxford and Cambridge are at the heart of this government's plans for economic growth, and you hinted at it in your first answer. How much do you think universities can actually deliver for the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, in terms of economic growth? It's a very difficult one for universities, isn't it?
It always is difficult, but I think there are things which are very important for universities, the areas around universities to have in their armory. The first is we need to agglomerate activity around certain universities. The more people who are agglomerated around a university, and you can see this, for example, in Boston in the United States, the more successful it becomes. It sort of has momentum and allows people to go from one place to the other to fail and succeed. Secondly, we need the ability to translate the discoveries that are made in universities into the commercial space. And that's happening around Cambridge. It's happening around Oxford as well. But more needs to be done. And I welcome some of the efforts that the Chancellor's made in getting the city to invest in the companies that need growth capital generated in the United Kingdom. That's something that the Council on Science and Technology, which I chair, has been pushing very hard over the last two governments, and it's pleasing to see that something is now happening. That will create growth, because growth comes from new shoots of economic activity, businesses formed, and there are plenty of people around Cambridge who can do just that, given the right conditions.
John, there's the growth issue, but there's also the inequality issue when it comes to Cambridge, this famous divide between town and gown. What would you do to address that?
Well, I think I went up to Cambridge just to test the town and gown that I remember when I was, there at primary school. I think it's going away very quickly. No doubt Cambridge is, as a city and as a broader catchment area, benefits from the university, and the university benefits from getting housing and infrastructure right around Cambridge. So that divide, I think, has gone down quite a lot. I've spoken to people in the Cambridge, the Cambridge hierarchy, the city hierarchy, and it's very different. What it does need, though, is investment in infrastructure and, of course, some housing. Housing tends to come along if you have the right infrastructure, and the government, some of the public purse, has to be spent on getting that right.
I've spoken recently to the Vice-Chancellor, Deborah Prentice, about the challenges posed by research funding and the lack of research funding. How would you be able to influence that in order to kind of build up research funding? Again, a kind of really critical time if Cambridge wants to deliver on its world-class reputation.
It really is. Well, I think I've got at least ACs at the table to help discussion on where research funding could go. The government's a very important funder of research, but so too is the private sector. But the government provides a lot of seed funding, and it's very important to get that focused in areas where we have world-class capability. Biomedical activity in Cambridge, the AI activity in Cambridge, the energy and energy transition activity in Cambridge. Arguably, the sum total of all people in these areas and more are the best in the world, and they need funding. So they get a lot of funding. We need to see if we can expand sources of funding, not just from the government, but also from worldwide sources, and particularly from the private sector. So private sector will follow, provided that there's something they can see which is developed from research into the commercial area. I know that from my experience.
I mean, you hint at it, but there is the funding for research issue, but then you've also got to actually get onto the AIM market, and that's had record low new issues and a 17% plunge in market value in the first quarter. Is there anything you think that could be done to revive that so that, these great ideas can actually go all the way to market and make some money, make some growth?
So look, I've actually had both companies, I've chaired companies going onto AIM and coming off AIM. AIM is full of far too many small companies that need to be in private hands for longer. There's no doubt about that, because there aren't enough analysts to follow stocks which are very small. I think, real IPOs nowadays need probably $5 billion of enterprise value in order to succeed really well. So it's just that there are plenty of choices for investors. So I think the private markets, both venture, growth equity and private equity buyout, are the areas that people need to focus more on to get finance for these smaller companies. I think the public markets do have a role, but the public markets are quite demanding in scale and track record, and they're not for everybody. I don't think any CEO who keeps saying, my ambition is to float the company, is, I think, not saying the right thing. Surely the ambition is to build a great product that fits into a market that continues to, not to float necessarily.
Okay. Lord Browne, thank you so much for being with us this morning. It's very good to speak to you. We are speaking to John Browne, of course. You did spend a long time at BP. I think it would be remiss not to ask you, given your hugely prominent role there, how much of a loss it would be to the UK if the deal with Shell goes ahead.
Sure. Well, let me say, first of all, I left BP 18 years ago, so it's not just yesterday, and I don't supervise BP. It would be a loss. Of course, it would be a great loss. BP certainly, when I was running it, we were the, I think, 5th or 7th largest entire company in the entire world, and it had great skill at developing responsibly oil and gas and actually providing huge employment for everybody. It was at one time, of course, the provider of £1 out of every £6 in every single pension fund in the UK. So I hope it's not lost, because it's a great part of the British business environment.
So your advice to Murray Auchincloss, John?
I have no advice for CEOs. I really think that former CEOs should keep out of advising present CEOs. This is not a good idea.
Okay, take that point. In that case, let me return to the fundamental issue, which is that the leading universities in the world, in the United States, most prominently Harvard, are currently under enormous pressure from the Trump administration to do what the Trump administration sees as being ideal. Harvard is engaged in a significant battle. You've talked about, the idea of being able to exchange ideas freely at Cambridge, were you to lead that university. The US and the current administration has also deeply criticised Britain, that freedom of speech in Britain is under threat. What concrete actions would you take to try to ensure that there is freedom academically, freedom of speech for students, for researchers at Cambridge going forwards? This seems to me a really foundational challenge.
Well, indeed it is. But first of all, it's not as if it's a new idea. It is what Cambridge stands for, and it simply needs to be reinforced. I think it's very important to take a strong position that everything must be done to make sure that people can speak freely, and they do not, in so doing, shut down freedom of speech for the people who disagree with them. So that needs to be policed quite carefully, and there are rules to do that, and they should be enforced. There is no doubt. Actually, those rules existed for a long time.
So then Cambridge has done a good job so far, in your view, and is exemplary right now, and you want to continue that?
It's not bad. There, of course, are always things that get in the way, and there are ups and downs. But I don't think that long-term values are judged by sometimes things that go wrong that then are corrected. So I think Cambridge needs to reinforce it, needs to teach people that, needs to stand for that in everything they do. And I may say they also need to do research with a freedom of investigation, research and scholarship.
And so a message of support for Harvard University in its battle with the US administration?
Well, it's up to Harvard how they do this. I think Harvard had a great, obviously very great standing, and how they now go forward is very much in their control in the circumstances of the day. But these changes in fashion, and they are almost fashion, or probably a partial reading of values, they go up and they go down. But in the end, the long-term value of the university, and they're trying to make that point legally, is that that's unchanged. So they have freedom of speech, that actually it's done in a way where it allows everyone.
They are losing millions and millions in funding in the US. So financially, it's potentially going to have a much bigger and longer term and fundamental impact on Harvard, led by the Harvard president, Alan Garber.
That may be true, but depending on how it all gets through the courts and what happens over a run of years. That may well be true. But that is very much, I'm afraid, is the nature of what is happening in the United States, and it's the United States' choice to have this administration in place, and it comes with these activities. I don't think it may well spread in the world. I hope it doesn't. We should be vigorous and very strong to prevent it affecting what goes on in Cambridge University.
Okay, John Browne, really good to talk to you. We thank you so much for your time. John Browne is, of course, running to become Chancellor of the University of Cambridge and was previously CEO of BP. John, we thank you for joining us on the programme.